So welcome. Thank you for taking the time to be here.
Yeah, sure.
I absolutely would love it if people dropped questions into the chat if they wanted to, but at the same time, I got plenty to talk about. So this is super exciting. Yeah, we're both entrepreneurs.
Hmm.
I went into education thinking I would just be a teacher, and you went into the health, mental health field thinking you'd probably be in practice. Did
Yeah.
you realize all of what that meant to kind of, did you realize the path that you would take? When did you realize that path?
It's funny. I've been talking about this recently. So I actually knew from early on, like eighth grade. Remember, we had to take those tests, and it was like
Yeah.
you'd be good in mental health. And I was like, "Ooh, I love people's stories, and I love the advice." And then I remember watching Silence of the Lambs, and I'm like, "Oh, people's minds are nuts." So I knew I wanted to be a psychologist. So that was always clear. But what I didn't know is like what I wanted to do within the field of clinical psychology. So I have evolved over time,
Yeah.
kind of, actualized, if you will. Where I started is very different from where I am
Yeah. Me too.
now, which is part of the growth process too. I mean,
Yeah.
again, what do you know?
So, I guess, the people that exist in this group that I've got going on, probably don't know you at all. So maybe you can give a brief overview.
So, I started off as an assessing psychologist in the beginning of my career. So I did, as you probably know, working with school systems, doing a lot of diagnosis and also mental health clarity. So for doctors, teachers, parts of IEPs, students, parents. So I worked a lot on the pathology side, if you will, and that was actually really exciting because it was helping to really differentiate and help identify for children or adults like the right direction and the type of treatment they needed. So I mean that's probably where I mostly worked a lot more with executive functioning, and I used to work with kids and adolescents, but to be honest. I wouldn't say that was my strength. So, I ended up evolving and
Teens
moving
are
in.
hard.
Yeah, they
They're
are. I
hard.
like teens, little kids,
Yeah,
but yeah, they are. They're all are. And the
they're
parents,
hard.
well, and I mean, if I'm going to be honest, yeah, I mean, I work in all different settings. I just was seeing some really bad stuff. And I'm like, I got to work with those parents before they have kids.
Yeah.
So I started, and that was before I even like became a trauma therapist. I didn't plan on that either, but so over time with my own mind body healing, I began to do a little bit more mind body practice, moving away from assessment and into mindfulness and somatic, and it just kind of grew from there. So, I mean, what I would say right now is I describe myself as a holistic, trauma-based therapist that uses an integrative approach. So, I'll use a lot of somatic, mind, body, and spirit techniques. So, anything from cognitive interventions to trauma, body, nervous system regulation. That's a big piece of it. And psychedelics. So I also recently have, started to use that for advanced healing, and that has been pretty cool in the neuroscience perspective
Yeah.
as well.
That's a fast growing field.
Hmm.
Yeah.
It is the wave of the future. So, and
That's
it's a
great that
good wave.
you're on the front of it. Yeah. Um, what is it that the psychedelics do for the brain that is so beneficial?
Yeah, what's super cool about and I work with ketamine because it's legal. Um, it works on the glutamate system, so more than like 50% of people on antidepressants are not benefiting from the actual medicines that we currently have. So this works on a different part of your system. What's really neat about it, aside from like immediate antidepressant and anti-anxiety impacts, like immediate, that it heals neural pathways that have been damaged over time, and it creates like significant neuroplasticity. So,
Mm.
so within these like window of 2 days to like 14 days, like your brain's like wet cement. You know how like we know if we repeat things over and over, we'll have a habit, but this just sort of like makes it a lot easier and a lot
Wow.
faster. So that's like the really kind of exciting part. But also there's other things. They call perspective medicine. It gets you out of like,
I I definitely see. Now you said
yeah,
something that was really interesting to me because you talked about shutting down the thinking brain to allow you to see the truth. Yet
yeah.
I spend so much time working with kids, when they're stuck in the reptilian brain and their adrenaline is pumping, I want them to actually stop feeling and think for a second and bring it into
Yes.
this like the third eye space, if you will, where they can open up and see things as they are, as opposed to feeling everything. And to me, that is thinking. Can you explain the difference between
Yes.
the two approaches?
Well, I think you're doing exactly what you're supposed to be doing in that
Good.
case, right? Because, like, right, if you can't regulate, you can't think, right? So, but for trauma, and most people are having parts or younger parts of them and are holding on to some unexpressed emotion or pain at some point. Obviously, some people have bigger experiences than others. And what happens is we develop so many defenses that guard against that, right? So, like, let's say you have a over-functioning perfectionist part, right? Because that part doesn't want you to fail because there's a part of you that, like, believes, or it was dangerous to fail or not
Hmm.
do something right.
Hmm.
And so, in this case, those defenses, like a lot of times in therapy, we'll just be managing the defenses. People are like, and that's what I used to do. Like, here's your anxious. How do you like manage your anxiety, right? Or how do you manage the perfectionist? And we could change it a little bit, but the pattern kept going, or the pattern wasn't changing. So at that point, like we're looking like, why is that pattern so rigid? And often when you track back through the body, there is a root cause. And so we want to quiet all those voices. We get a lot of voices in our head,
Hmm.
you know. It's true. We have multiple personalities. It's only a problem if they don't know about each other.
Hmm.
Um,
If they don't
so
deal with each other.
yeah, so
Yeah.
it's hard work. That I just say that the trauma piece, and this is where I think it's more important, is to some degree, and I'll come back to how it can be helpful for ADHD. But for the trauma piece, it allows you to do that work is very hard work because you have to be able to tolerate a certain level of emotion,
Discomfort. Yeah.
right? Yeah, discomfort, and there are amazing like therapeutic techniques that help people build toward that. But the reality is, we're in a emotional avoidant world and
Yeah.
country and
Yeah. We're
generation.
seeping the cheap fix of the dopamine hit on the phone all the time, right?
Yeah, yeah. I do think our generation's like the one that's the recovering generation that are is really like opening the door for
Yeah.
children and the next few. Anyway, whatever I'm saying, not to go on a tangent. But what is also so it's really helpful in that case. We want those thinking parts to be down so we can access in a more comfortable way the things that need to be dealt with, so we can rewire, express the emotions, and be able to rewire the thinking. So, but what it does do with that connection back to like self and quieting, it really actually helps with ADHD, with presence and connection,
Up with everything.
everything.
And sure as daylight I did. Um, but you are
Wait, wait,
you are
what'd you diagnose yourself with? What's
generalized anxiety disorder.
okay.
Yeah. And I mean, currently I'm on a dose of Zoloft, that I would not like to be on forever,
Yeah, I understand.
but it's helping me through a tough time. So I'm willing to admit that,
Mm-hmm.
there are lots of things that lots of people deal with. Um,
Absolutely.
but that being said, you kind of struggled, and Jesse too was so interesting when I interviewed him too. He had a similar connection where it's like we were all such good students, like,
Mhm.
but yet we just powered through it, and at what sacrifice to our well-being
Mm.
and then we went to college, and there was like the rubber band effect where like we had to face the realities of things that were struggling. So tell a little bit about your self-discovery, if you will.
Yeah. I mean, it's kind of funny in hindsight. Like, all right, like I think I actually like basically once I started diagnosing everybody, I was like, oh, I'm like, yo, yowzers, that's me. And to know that I struggled, okay, so I knew in the beginning in elementary school, like in the first and second grade, I got pulled out for like some delays in reading, math, and whatever. Apparently, my mom told me later they were like, she'll never graduate high school. Like,
Oh my
can you
gosh.
imagine, right?
You're a doctor.
I
Come
know.
on.
So, but I do remember the sixth grade, like, remember, like, deciding because my brother was like smart and I was like, I want to be a good student. So I made a decision then. And I think that's important because I've always been motivated, but I always had to work. I feel 10 times harder than everybody else. Like, I couldn't sit in class. You know how many notes I passed with Kelly? And like, I was passing notes all the time. Like, I could not listen unless I was super, super interested, right? And so
Hyperfocus, yes.
yeah, it shouldn't happen that much. So paying attention was always an issue, but I'd go home and I would just work for hours on hours. So
Mm,
I'd have to read, write, highlight, audio it, and I was great at memorizing, so I could be very good at tests. So I say all that because I laugh and I know that I think I finished. We were all in that top 10% of the grade,
yeah.
but I'm always like, oh, I faked it. I just got through. I'm not as smart as them. And so,
Hmm.
comparing myself always to the rest of you, and I just felt like, oh, they get it so much easier. They're just so smart. So that anxiety, but I probably kept that inside because I was like, I don't remember you being anxious, but I was like always anxious
Yeah.
um, about performance and things of that nature.
Yeah.
And the same thing went through until went through college and grad school, and I was still like, oh my God, how did they give me a doctorate? I do not deserve this. They're gonna find out the truth. Finally shed that, thank God, about 10,
That's
15
good.
years ago. Yeah.
You are worthy, absolutely.
Yeah, but you have this self-concept and discount. But anyway, what was happening when I first started working, and I can hyper focus really well. What was getting me was writing these reports. I had to write those psychological
Yeah.
evaluations and the sitting down to do it, and then the actual length of expression. So I got started getting in these cycles of avoidance, being
Yeah.
late,
And then it
hiding,
piles up.
shame cycle, trying to
Yeah.
oh, you didn't get it. I sent this. I sent it. I didn't send it, and I'm like just lying.
Oh,
So it was pretty awful. So,
yeah.
I decided, well, pretty quickly, I talked to a doctor and started some medicine, and that was the first time. I was also dealing with a lot of anxiety at the time because that was a really toxic workplace. First job out
Mm,
in the real world. That was awesome.
yeah.
So it was a little bit of both, but for sure, I've been on some variation of ADD medicine for the last, 20 years.
Oh,
For last year, I was off, which was interesting. So, but that has helped. And I'd say, I also dealt with a lot of the just under arousal, like getting going in the morning, like getting my
yeah.
brain on. Well, the Dan Siegel hand model
Yeah.
with the brain, right?
Yep.
And it's like this is the emotion, this is the prefrontal cortex, and they're all getting along well. And the emotions are this, right? You're flipping the lid. And so, to your point, that emotion needs to be addressed, right? And we have to understand, are we overstimulated or understimulated? Are we in fight or flight, or are we in shutdown? And this is really important that you're teaching and coaching your students on this, because they have to become it's in their best interest to become aware of
Awareness. Yes.
where they are, and because the strategy is gonna that's gonna depend on the strategy, right? So when people are in a hyper arousal state, for some people, and this is one of my big revelations in the last year or two, I would just be like, oh, everyone needs to ground and breathe. But actually, sometimes when you're in a hyperactive state, you got to move that energy and
Yeah.
shake it and
Release it.
yeah. So actually teaching people to ask them what does my body need? So if they need to move it, and just 2 to 3 minutes of some type of somatic exercise will shift your state if people are willing to stick with that.
Yeah.
So they may need that grounding to bring down, or they may need to move and shake, right? Or breathing, so that's why people experiment. And then on the other side, if you're shut down, and you got to activate your body.
Yeah.
So, right, so you may need to move, you may need to put yourself in an ice cold shower because that'll do it. Um,
Yeah.
you
I
know,
definitely I definitely went through a period of time where the last part of my shower was making it as cold as I could make it for as long as I could. And it where I want, and
yes.
settle, go see the kids in college and then travel and just be able to have that sort of flexibility with that the internet should provide for us, you know.
And
But
why not? That's why we dream, right?
yes, dream on,
Yes.
baby.
So, anyway, thank you for having me. I can't
Yes,
wait to
thank
see your
you.
journey. I'm so
Thank you so
excited
much,
for you.
Fishy.